Let's take a look at how we use file handlers. I'm going to create a new project. Specifically, we're going to look at file handler template. So that's what I'm calling the project. And this is now created a new project that I'll launch and click on edit. A file handler serves files, and a file handler template allows us to write code in files. To enable that, we click on the template option that's part of the file handler service. Another way of doing the same thing, let's save this first. Another way of doing the same thing, which is enabling template, is to go to the code editor. And in the code editor, we can choose the Gramex.yaml configuration, which is out here in the file Gramex.yaml, and make sure that under quarks for that particular file handler, template is true. Let's take a closer look at this. We have a set of URLs. One of them is called file handler template home, in which the handler is file handler and it has a set of keyword arguments. By adding template true, the file index.html now becomes a template. And if this were not specified, then index.html is no longer a template. How exactly do we use templates? Let's look at the output file. We're going to go back and launch the application. That's opened the application and is launching it in a new window. I'll take that to the right side, and it has the simple contents, welcome to Gramex, with a button that says learn more. On the left hand side, I'll move the code and let's open the editor. Index.html has the contents that are shown out here. So I say, let's say welcome to templating, and that is available now here as the contents of the file. Now, if I have template colon true, I can write content that's in Python. For example, let's get rid of this. I can say let's put in a calculation such as 3 plus 4. When I put in anything within double curly brackets, whatever is inside is interpreted by Gramex as a Python expression, and that's what you see here. If templating were not true, so let's go back to gramex.yaml, and we either turn templating to false or we completely remove this line. Both have the same effect. When we reload this, it shows exactly what we typed here. That allows us to put in any kind of templating, any kind of server-side code into the application. Let's start by building a sentiment analysis application. What we're going to do is take some code and calculate its sentiment. The way we'll do that is by importing the text blob library. Now, text blob may or may not have been installed. So we start the terminal, pip install text blob, and looks like it's already installed. So this command ought to work. When we reload it, well, we don't see anything, but that's because import text blob will merely import text blob. Let's see if it actually has imported by printing the module details. It shows module text blob from this particular location. So looks like text blob has in fact been installed and imported. Instead of specifying import text blob, we can also say from text blob import text blob the class and remove this line. Now what this does, it imports the class text blob. So let's look at what this shows. So we now have class text blob imported. This allows us to use text blob as part of this application. Let's set a variable. Set, let's say blob is equal to a text blob of a sentence. This is good. Let's add another sentence. This is bad. And we'll figure out the sentiment of these two sentences. Now, what we've done so far is used templates to print values like this. We've used templates to import, and there are a couple of ways in which we can import, either say import text blob or from text blob import text blob. And these are specific commands. Import is a command, from something import something is a command. Similarly, set is a command. Set is a fairly versatile command. After that, you can type in any Python statement. Here, within double curly brackets, you can type in any Python expression. But after brace percent set, you can type in any Python statement that includes assignment statements, and that's typically what it's used for. So what this will do is create a variable called blob that has the text blob object constructed. Let's print that and see what it looks like. It prints out the sentences, this is good and this is bad, because that's the string representation of the text blob instance. Behind the scenes, this has created two sentences within the text blob. So we can iterate through it using the for command. For, let's say, sentence in blob.sentences and end that for loop. This any for must be concluded with an end. Within that, we can print the sentence itself. The sentence object will be printed as a string. Anywhere in this, we can use HTML. So I'm going to put in each of these as a paragraph. So we should now see two paragraphs. One, okay, clearly this is not working. It's saying, looks like you're missing some data for this feature. To download, run python -m text blob something or the other. So let's run that. Out here, I'm going to say python -m text blob dot download underscore corpora and press enter. That's downloading and unzipping a bunch of files. Now let's reload. Yes, so now we have two paragraphs. One that says this is good, another that says this is bad. Each of these has a sentiment which comprises of two values, sentence.sentiment.polarity, which indicates whether the sentence is positive or negative. So this is good is a 0.7 plus polarity. This is bad is minus 0.7 polarity. So that's a good sentence, that's a bad sentiment. And each of these can be also evaluated as a sentence.sentiment.subjectivity. The higher the subjectivity, the less sure text blob is. So in this case, it's 60% sure that this is good. This case, it's 67% sure that this is bad in terms of sentiment. Now let's display that in a slightly better way. What we'll do is make the sentence red if the polarity is high. So I don't want to display the polarity. I'll instead say, put in a style with a color which is, and the color will be an expression. The color, let's call it color. And this we will define as color is equal to red if sentence sentiment polarity is negative, else make it green. With this, we have the sentence, this is good in green, this is bad in red, and we are also displaying the subjectivity here. Now this is too many decimals, so let's display the subjectivity in a formatted way. So let's say we want this displayed as a percentage, and we want the percentage maybe to show one decimal place at most. So that's saying it's 0.1%. I forgot the brace, sorry. What am I doing? Oh, I forgot the colon before it. So yeah, that's a 60.0%. This is good is green, and 66.67%. This is bad. We can also put in conditionals. I may only want to print those where we are at least, let's say, 60% or 50% sure, or let's say in this case 65% sure. If the sentence sentiment subjectivity is more than, let's say, 0.65, sorry, let's say less than 0. If it's not too subjective, then print it. Else we could do something. We could just say P sentence and not put in any style around it and that. So we have a new set of commands: if, else, and end. This will say this is good 60%, this is bad, but it's not really sure. Now, we don't necessarily need to have the cutoff as 0.65. Let's say 0.8 as our cutoff. And in this case, it does print the message for both of those. It would be good to allow the user to be able to type in their own sentences and get the results of the sentiment analysis. So let's say we call this sentiment analyzer. And this sentiment analyzer will take an input from the user. Let's say, let's put it as a text area. And that renders a small little text area here, whose name, let's say, is text. And we'll put this whole thing inside a form. This form now has a text area, let's say a button. Type is submit. And the contents are, let's say, analyze sentiment. Now, that shows a button which is not looking very nice. So let's add some Bootstrap controls out here. We've already imported Bootstrap as part of the theme. So let's say this is a form control and this is a button default as a block, maybe. Let's say button primary, and yeah, center it a bit. So yeah, and give it a little bit of margin. Right. So now we have a button, and when I type in something like, let's say, hello world, and click on analyze sentiment, it reloads the page, but you'll notice that the URL has a question mark text is equal to hello world. What we now need to do is pick this and analyze the sentiment for that. So instead of analyzing the sentiment for this is good, this is bad, I want to analyze the sentiment for a new text variable. How do we get this text variable? Well, there's something called handler. And what I'll do is, let's say, put this text as an empty string for now. But handler is a predefined variable in Tornado templates. And let me show you what that looks like. It just says gramex.service.filehandler object, but it has a series of parameters. One of those attributes is args. And args is a dictionary that contains the keys, which are exactly the same as what we put in here. In other words, any form submission, whether it's get or post, both will work. And the values are an array which contain all of the values mapped against text. You can have multiple values of text. You can say and text is equal to a new sentence. This could happen if, for example, you had two different text areas named text. So if I said, for example, 1, 2, 3, and click on analyze sentiment, you get 1, 2, 3 here. But we really only want one text area. So what we're going to do is say that the text is coming from handler.args, and from this get text. But what if there's no text? The first time we load it, there won't be any text. So that could throw an error. Handler.args, and that'll say there is no text. So if there is no text, we'll default it to an empty string. But remember that the values are an array. So you have to encapsulate this into an array and get the 0th element. Now, this will analyze the contents of the sentence we type in. So let's type in again. This is, let's change the order. This is bad. This is good. And analyze the sentiment for that. It says this is bad, the first sentence, that's 66.7% subjectivity. This is good, 60% subjectivity. What we've now done is pretty much built a little application. And this application allows the user to type in their content and have it analyzed. You could write your own custom modules here as well and use it as part of the application. Let me show you how to do that. We will take all of this content and put it into a new file. We'll call this file, let's say, mysentiment.py. And in mysentiment.py, we will put in more or less the same content. We'll start with, well, we don't need import text blob. From text blob, import text blob. And let's define a function called get sentiment. We'll figure out what are the parameters that it needs to take. This will set text to handler.args.get of text, which is probably something that we can pass from the outside. So let's assume we pass the text from the outside directly. Now the blob should compute the sentiment of the text. We will loop in through each of these sentences. We will set the color to red or green. And if the sentence subjectivity is less than 0.8, we will create this, let's say we'll yield the string, which is the color is, well, let's use f strings. So color colon color. And then comes the sentence itself as a string. And then we'll put in sentence dot sentiment dot subjectivity as the next part of the formatted string. And with that, we should be able to close the string. Next, if that is not the case, else we will yield just the sentence itself. Yield the f string and the sentence. And what this is going to do is create an iterator that create a generator that constantly yields these. And if you're not comfortable with generators, not a big deal. We can convert this into an array. Instead of yield, we'll say result.append of the string and result.append of the string, where we're constructing the HTML dynamically. Now, what we have to do is call get sentiment and pass it this text. So let's do that. We will import my sentiment and call my sentiment dot get sentiment of the text that we want to pass, which is from the handler argument. Let's see what this renders. I'm going to reload this URL and it yields none. That's because looks like we forgot to return anything in this application. Return, let's say, join the result. Now, let's see if when I reload this, the output changes. Sadly, it doesn't. That's because when we put something in a Python file, then the Python file does not get reloaded when it changes. It is imported one time and then it stays cached. So if we want to have any changes in the Python file reloaded, then there are a couple of ways. One option is to go back to the Gramex homepage and stop and restart the application. So I'm going to click on putting it into hibernate mode. And now the app is hibernating and re-enable it. It started. Now let's reload. And okay, it's still not reloaded. Now it's reloaded and I get some output. But this is a bit cumbersome and we also have a problem. Firstly, it's rendering the output directly as text. In other words, it seems to have escaped all of the HTML that we generated. Secondly, this process of restarting the application every time is a bit painful. So let's see how we can overcome both of these. Firstly, in the template, which you don't have to reload, by the way, any changes made to the HTML template will automatically get picked up. Instead of double quotes, if your content actually has HTML, you can say %raw and put in the output. What that does is treats the output as if it has HTML and it doesn't further escape it. So now when we reload this page, let's save it. We get the output that is in HTML, and the code that was generated is used exactly as it is in the source. How can we make changes to the Python file without having to reload? Well, this is one place where gramex.cache comes in handy. And what you can do is say gramex.cache.reload module, whatever module you want to reload every time. So my sentiment. What this is going to do is while you are developing, every time it's going to reload my sentiment.py. So supposing I made a change here, instead of the color being red and green, let's say I made this orange and purple and saved it. Let's reload this. There's an error. Oh, okay. Sorry. There is no command called gramex.cache.reload module. We have to say set gramex.cache.reload module and reload it. And a refresh shows that this is now in orange color. That's a color orange. And this is now in purple, which is exactly what we had in the new color scheme. When you're deploying the application, you can get rid of this reload module statement. One way of doing that is by commenting it. So anything in brace hash and ends with that is a comment, which can be a multi-line comment if you'd like. And this is a good way of putting in comments that are only on the server side and won't even appear on the client side. Or you could, of course, always just delete this and it would work perfectly fine. Like handler.args, there are several other variables that you can use. So I'm going to show you a few of those. There's handler.request.uri, and this has the full request URL, everything after the page. Handler dot, so that's handler.request.uri. Let me put all of these into a pre-statement so you can see them a little more clearly. Yeah, that's handler.request.uri. There's also handler.request.path, which shows the current path that is requested, which is just the first part of the URI, and several other variables that you can use. You can check whether this file handler was requested using the get or the post or any other method. In this case, the method is get. And I'd encourage you to look at what else is there in handler.request. A good way of doing that would be to say dir of handler.request, and that would show all the keys that are available here. And you'll find that you can use .host, host name, method, query arguments, query remote IP, and so on. This apart, you also have access to handler.currentUser, which at the moment would show you the user object of the user if they are logged in. And in this particular case, there may be no user that is logged in, so it's displaying none. So that was a quick walkthrough of the templating capabilities in FileHandler. Keep in mind that anything within double curly brackets is printed as it is, but escaping the contents of the HTML. If you don't want to escape it, use %raw. You saw the %import, %if, %for, and several other commands. For a full set of, for a full syntax of this, you can check out the documentation on Gramex, specifically where it points you to the templating syntax. This templating syntax is based on the Tornado templating language, and this has more details on many more features that you can use that are directly part of FileHandler templates.